Hi, everyone. This is Catching Up with the Nerds with your hosts, Tom and JC, and our special guest, David. This is a podcast about two dads that are catching up on all the nerdy stuff we missed, sharing how we pass on our nerdy passions to our kids, and deep diving into nerd pop culture to make it more accessible for you. Welcome back, listeners. Hey, guys. How's it going?
Good day, mate.
All good, all good, all good.
Yeah. Shall we do our intros? David, you want to kick us off?
I can do. My name is David Sago. I mostly podcast these days. I like to do the production side of things, editing, work with ideas and things like that. I am a nerd, self-confessed. I'm out of the closet. I'm into Marvel comics and the comic book universe. I'm big into computer games. Originally a Nintendo guy up until the PlayStation 4 when I crossed over. And I think that is all. I think that's all. I dabble in a little bit of anime. Just enough.
Nice.
Nice. All right, my turn. My name is Tom. I am 50% of the Catching Up with the Nerd podcast. I'm also 25% of the Grit and Grind basketball podcast. So it gives me 75% podcaster, 100% French. What do I like? Video games. I love my PlayStation 5, which is currently being abused by my son. He's also playing on the Switch these days. It's quite interesting. I love movies. I love Marvel comics. I love DC comics. I love Batman. And I love everything that is nerdy, how that has to do with technology. And in my spare time, I've been messing with old consoles and trying to refurbish them and make them work again because they deserve love, guys, just like human beings. And tomorrow is Valentine's Day. So if you want to spend sexy time with your other half or with consoles, I'm open to both IDs. That's it. That's enough talking.
I think you just set up a shop where you sell Valentines in the shape of like game consoles that you can send to people.
Cute.
Wow. Cut that from the recording. Tom, get to work, and I want 10%.
Oh, why?
Because I was here.
Damn it. Fine.
I think that shop has to have that and the whole the GameCube controller idea that I tossed out a couple of weeks ago. I still stand by that, David. I think you should take the GameCube controller.
Mm-hmm.
I find that thing infinitely sad. No, GameCube. Yeah, no, Nintendo 64 controller. That's it. I find that thing so satisfying. I think that should be like a fidget. You just literally unplug it and sell it to people for kids just to fidget with it all day long. I think it's
fine. You get 10% too. Fine.
That is our retirement.
Any fidget toy that doesn't make noise is fine by me as a teacher.
Yes, that's correct.
So I am Juan Carlos Garay. I am 50% of the podcast, 100% Latino, and I don't know, 87.7% nerd, I'll say. I have a lovely wife named Fiorella. I have two kids, oldest one named Aiden and youngest one named Arabelle. And I love my graphic novels and comics. I'll read anything that is, funny enough, not Marvel or DC related until recently. And now I've been reading up on my Marvel and DC. I've always been kind of independent or other publisher type comics. And I do love me some nerdy TV, nerdy series, and I dabble in video games slightly and definitely big into anime. So that's we have now assembled people. This is now a three-legged Voltron. And let's cut and rewind that one as well.
No. That stays in. That stays in. I shouldn't be the only one who suffers.
Not the only one.
Yeah, I think they'll knock you down to about 44% nerd after that one.
Yep. Totally. And next week, 12.
My nerd card will be handed in shortly.
Why are we here, JC? Why are we here today?
Yeah, why are we talking about this month? We are talking about Black History, people. More specifically, it's Black History Month. It's February, and we decided why not look at the intersection of Black history and nerd culture? Where do those two come together? How has it worked? How has it not worked? And what are some of our recommendations for this month? So if you're going to go check out some media this month, whether it be you're picking up a graphic novel, whether you're checking out a show, whether you're playing a video game, we just want to drop some knowledge on you to say, hey, think about this when you're doing it, because there can be some other properties out there you're not familiar with that you might want to go check out for Black History Month.
Right. So part of the Black History Month, as we were saying, we just all came out with a bunch of recommendations for anything that is related to Black history. And we thought we would share, as JC said or mentioned just before, that we would come up with a list of things we really enjoyed and things that you guys, well, we also think you guys would enjoy. So why don't we start with you, JC? And I think you're going to start with something you really love, Spawn.
Yeah. So for anyone that doesn't know what Spawn is, and there is probably a decent amount of people, because this is actually a fairly old comic / series / movie that came out in the 90s. Spawn is the story of a CIA assassin, basically, and his name is Lawson. And he's hired by the government to basically kill people, and he does it willingly. He's basically paid to hire, like got hired to kill sort of person. But one day he gets double crossed by the government, and he ends up getting killed. He also finds out that his whole family was killed, and he basically goes to hell, for lack of a better word. And he's explained that it's because even though he was generally a decent human being, he very willingly killed people, which makes him a not very decent human being. And this gets explained to him when he gets to hell. And he makes a deal with as usual, as you do, he makes a deal with the demon. Not the devil himself, but like an actual demon. I believe the demon is called Malboja or something like that. He makes that deal, comes back to Earth, but comes back with superpowers. And the most baller outfit you've ever seen, dude. Like, his superhero outfit is amazing. It's like they take like it's like if you married like Batman's cape with Doctor Strange cape, where the cape kind of somewhat sentient, but it's just drawn in the coolest possible way. And he has these like chains that come out from his back that are also like kind of somewhat sentient. They like know where to go and like attack people. So it's just characters that is amazing. But the really interesting thing about it is like they decided as kind of the lead from his comics, like he was a black man, comes back and his face is kind of hidden, but you find out that yes, he is still a black man that has come back reincarnated. And more importantly, he doesn't know why he's back, which is a really interesting part. And he starts to figure out why he's back. But the trick about it was the demon wanted to make sure that he was his agent on Earth. He wanted him to act on behalf of the demon and just like basically wreak chaos on Earth. And he refuses to do that. But at the same time, he's not entirely a good guy. So it feels like somewhat of an anti-hero story. And I think the best thing you can connect it to nowadays is Venom. In that Venom's not really a good guy, but he's kind of played like he's the protagonist of his story regardless. And basically that's how it plays out. And he goes off and obviously has adventures and stuff like that. Like things happen and he's on this quest to basically kill. And it plays a little bit Kill Bill style. He's basically taken out all the agents that killed his wife and himself until eventually one day he gets to the big bad, right? And that's kind of writing for. There's other like side stories that go off of it and stuff like that. But I won't go into those too much, but the interesting thing is that this is why, to me, the comic is super fascinating. Two things. One, for anybody who doesn't know the story of Image Comics, it is really, really interesting how it shook up the comics industry in the 90s. So Image Comics was founded by Todd McFarlane and like, I believe another two creators. And it's the equivalent of if you were to take like Jeff Johns, Tom King, and Al Ewing out from DC and Marvel right now, which are some of their hottest comic writers. And they said, you know what? We're going to take our characters with us and just go and start our own label. That's basically what Image did, because Todd McFarlane had been drawing Spider-Man and had been the most successful Spider-Man artist of that time. And he basically took all this IP with him that he had, not Spider-Man, obviously, and with two other creators as well. And then they started their own label. And their whole thing is this label will be for the artist. This is not as a publisher that doesn't basically recognize the artist, because the artists of these, like the writers, the illustrators have basically been screwed by Marvel and DC for years and years, barely making any money off the IP. And they're like, no, we want to reward it. Anybody wants to come work with us, you're going to get much more money than DC and Marvel. And it took off. And Image Comics is still around to this day. But the interesting is, like, the first comic they launched once they created Image was Spawn. And it sold 1.7 million copies of the first comic, which, to put into perspective, like the highest selling comic that Marvel had when Star Wars came back to Marvel sold about 1 million copies. Like, it just sold like crazy. You just don't get these numbers in nowadays because the market is just so saturated, right? And it became a really great selling comic. They went on to like get people like Neil Gaiman to write on it. Alan Moore had a run on it. Even Frank Miller had a run on it. And the comic had went on to basically create a cartoon series. So it's like somewhat anime inspired in terms of the illustration, but it's basically an animated series that ran on HBO in the late 90s, and even a movie came of it. That was officially, actually, is the first superhero movie that has a black lead when it came out, because it came out before Blade. It came out before we get like Hancock, and the music came out in like early 2000s. So yeah, that's Spawn, guys.
Ooh, I would debate that.
Yeah, go for it.
Debate that. Yes. There's a film that I watched in what must have been the mid-90s when it made its way to our TV screens, and that's the Meteor Man, who gets his powers from a meteor that lands in the hood.
Wait, this is the Robert Townsend movie?
Yes.
Oh shit, I totally forgot about that. You're right.
Yeah.
Really,
1993, so 4 years before.
I watched that movie unironically.
As a kid, I did too.
Exactly. I was so fascinated with it when I was a kid. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, good pull. Yeah.
But Spawn is very important. Very, very important.
Dude, we got shouts out to Robert Townsend. I have not thought of that movie in so long.
Yeah.
So I just want to go back to the movie Spawn as well, because that I'm quite interested. So I don't think I've actually watched a film that is, what was it, 97 when it came out?
Yeah.
I think I'll try and go find if I can see it. You know, if I can get it somewhere. I don't know if it's on Netflix or anything. I'll get my hands on it at some point. But was that a complete bomb as well? Didn't it do awfully bad? Was in what, because it's part of that weird period of the comics to film or comics to movies era, right? It was like where X-Men was also in there, when he was like, oh god, it looks cheap, it looks bad, and the acting is terrible. Is that what happened to Spawn also?
Spawn at the time was X-Men was a step up from a movie like Spawn. Yeah, Spawn wasn't rated very well at all. No. And I think it was more because it was caught in that, like you say, those early days when it was difficult to sort of portray a lot of the visuals that were so well drawn in comics. Bringing those to life always felt weird. Like I felt that way about the Penguin in Batman Returns, for example. Like the whole fact that they made him an actual penguin, it's like, well, that's not what the character is. But bringing those demons to life in Spawn as well, it looked kind of cheap almost, and it gives it this sort of I don't know.
It's like Killer Clowns, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
I think I've seen a trailer and it reminded me of that movie. Is it Killer Clowns in Space or something, or from space? So it's this weird 80s, 90s film. Like,
dude,
do you remember that?
Don't mess with Killer Clowns in Space. That was my formative years. That movie shaped who I am, dude.
No, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that in terms of the visuals, right?
Yeah, and whenever films look like that, it's so you almost can't take them seriously, right? It automatically gives them sort of like a whimsical feel, whereas the story of Spawn is actually really dark and can be quite powerful if it's portrayed correctly.
It got stuck in the uncanny valley. That's what happened to that movie.
That awkward.
It wasn't trying to parody, so it couldn't get away with it. It was trying to be serious, but technology wasn't there, and it just wasn't. And it wasn't directed in a way that it would allow for that. Because I think we talked about in a previous episode about like how Blade 2 definitely is caught in the uncanny valley where like the fight scene in the end they look rubbery and weird. But thematically the movie is so interesting, and the coolness factor is so there because the direction is there that it kind of doesn't matter. Because you get also the practical special effects that counteract the weird like uncanny valley stuff. But with Spawn, they just went all in on this like technology that wasn't there yet, and unfortunately it wasn't well directed. So yeah, that's why the cartoon series, the animated series, did way better, and I would recommend to most people that's a great, much better place to start.
Well, that's a good idea. Maybe, I mean, there's still going to be a follow-up movie or a reboot of Spawn, with who I don't think it's confirmed, but Jamie Foxx is sort of attached to the project.
Well, Jamie Foxx is trying to make it happen. So
it's trying to make it happen. Okay. Yeah.
Todd McFarlane, ever since the first one came out, he's immediately wanted to redo it because he was never happy with the first movie. And Jamie Foxx kind of said, like, look, if you do it, I'm all in. He said he's wanting to produce, star in it, like the whole thing. And it's caught in one of those development loops that I'm not sure whether to make it happen. You would think that off the back of Black Panther, like they would just immediately greenlight it, and they're still back and forth on it.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm wondering. Yeah, because the sort of the vibe around black-led movies and black superhero-led movies that's sort of got flipped onto its head now. Well, largely due to Black Panther, right? So you think that now this would be a lot easier to get the go ahead, but it's just. I guess it takes time also with the pandemic to get stuff agreed upon, and then get relighted. So I guess, especially big names. I think I've seen, what was the other name? There's attached to a project. Jeremy Renner is also in there. So it could be what we need. Let's get more Marvel guys involved in that.
Because in the Spawn, both in the comics and in the animated series, there's basically a set of detectives that Spawn works with. They're kind of like his Jim Gordon type thing, and he works with those detectives. Those detectives, they were so well written, they got eventually their own series that spun off of it. So Renner's on to play one of those detectives, which I'm like, I'm still lukewarm on Renner. I don't know. I
Depends. Yeah, I think he's got a type like Hawkeye is definitely good for him. But yeah, there's a bunch of I don't know. I can't see him cast in anything else than.
I feel he's getting one-dimensional. Like he only plays the same character over and over again. It's like like Brendan Fraser. It's like he's always the same character. Let's be honest.
Brendan Fraser.
So yeah. Oh, who's Brendan Fraser?
No, he's Brendan Fraser, and
he's playing himself.
All of his films. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it.
I am myself acting as myself.
No, but sorry, I gotta rewind back to like it's just I'm so caught up in your Meteor Man comment, and the first thing I thought of was as soon as you said Meteor Man, have you guys ever seen Leonard Part 6?
No.
Okay, so most bonkers premise ever. It's a spy spoof starring Bill Cosby, and you have to go watch it just for the sake of it just in the same way we're talking about how like you have to lean into the ridiculousness for it to work. This is kind of like The Naked Gun with a black protagonist,
right?
And they lean into the ridiculousness so much. But one of like the scenes of the movie you have to go back and watch it. They're stuck in a roof, and if they can't jump off the roof, and they're being attacked by lobsters.
Okay.
The way they get out of it is like all of a sudden he pulls out butter from his pocket and starts to go melted butter, and the lobsters start freaking out because he thinks he's going to cook them. Dude, the level of ridiculousness it has, it's like it has to be seen to like really figure out like how much it does not take itself seriously.
It's so bad it's good.
It is so levels bad that it makes it good. I highly recommend go back and watch it.
Sharknado of spy films.
It's a 2.2. It's a 2.2 out of 10 on IMDb, and it's a 9% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yes.
So,
and Bill Cosby issues aside, because that's the thing, and we must acknowledge, it is what it's just to see what the industry was giving to the intersection of
Yeah.
like black artists and nerd culture. And you're like, really? This is where we started. So that's why, once again, pulling it back to Spawn, it felt important that this character was a lead and that it sold a lot. It was a box office success and a critical success outside of the movie. The movie's the one that kind of really tanked, but the animated series, highly recommended still. Like I'm actually going to do a rewatch this month.
As we try, also aiming for kids to pick stuff up. How violent is it? Because again, I'm not well versed in the world of Spawn, but I can see the graphic style sort of hinting at violence.
The animated series is a R.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So it is not. It is definitely squarely in teen territory. Like it needs to be like 16, 17, I'd say, to pick it up. Same with the comic. It tends to be pretty violent. If violence is your bar, it definitely like it does not hold back. There's a lot of like people getting disemboweled with chains that are flying around, but in the coolest stylistic way possible. It's just I can't say how cool this comic is. I absolutely love it.
Okay, that's I'll add it to my list of stuff you keep recommending to me, JC.
And actually, for you, Tom, specifically, I would lead with there is a mashup of Todd McFarlane and Frank Miller coming together to do a Spawn comic, which is Spawn and Batman, and it's baller.
Wow.
It's as good as it sounds.
Yep. That's definitely on my list as well.
Yeah.
Cool. That was a good first recommendation. Now let's move on to dive with what? Black Panther, I guess. Let's do this.
Yes. So I'm covering films and television. I wanted to start with the Black Panther film, but also start by talking a bit about the Black Panther character because like Spawn, he was actually first written by white writers, white creators, white writers, back in the 60s, I believe. Yeah, I think it was in the 60s. And he was created because, wow, completely forgotten his name.
It's happening to
Huey P. Newton, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King.
No, Marvel Man.
Oh, Stan Lee.
Stan Lee.
Gotcha.
Stan Lee. Stanley and Jack Kirby. Stanley and Jack Kirby.
That's it.
All right. He was created because Stan Lee wanted to have a black lead comic book character. I actually think Monica Rambeau might have already been introduced into the Marvel universe, but they wanted a lead for a comic. And as we know, we rarely ever get black female leads in anything of this nature. So they came up with this character, called him the Black Panther. He's an African king who leads the country of Wakanda. And he is sort of pitched almost like a Batman-like character in that he uses gadgets and things like that to his advantage. He's also rich like Bruce Wayne, but he doesn't have a secret identity, right? Everyone in the city of Wakanda knows exactly who he is. Part of being the king comes with the responsibility of also being the Black Panther. I find it interesting that they went with that name in the 60s because it was very provocative with the Black Panther organization who was fighting against lack of equality for black people and lack of civil rights for black people in America at the time. But they sort of tone it down by relating it back to the animal. But they made sure that he was very powerful in his environment. He's a king, he's a leader, he's rich, and in terms of intelligence and technology and things like that, Wakanda is the most advanced nation on the earth, right? But they've just hidden in plain sight and cut out the rest of the world from getting to their inventions and things like that and to permeating their society. very interesting character, but like Spawn, originally made by white people. So it was really important that when they decided they were going to make the Black Panther movie as part of, was it phase 3
Phase
of
3,
the
yeah.
Marvel
Yep.
Cinematic Universe, they brought on a black director, predominantly black cast, and in Ryan Coogler and his production company, and they ended up making the 11th highest grossing film of all time. I think it was 7 or 8 when it launched at the time, and a few things have overtaken it. But it was a huge deal. Even in the build-up, I think people started to realize that this film was going to break records, because not only did it engage the enormous Marvel audience at that time, having gone through phases 1 and 2, we knew that Marvel movies sold and they were some of the biggest films of all time. Then you added the fact that it had a black lead, and you knew that that would bring in a whole new audience. And I just think it was a really important film. It's an obvious recommendation. Like, I'm pretty much preaching to the choir here. If you're listening to this, you've probably seen the film already. But I just wanted to highlight how important of a film it was. There were images of school kids being taken to see the film for free. And it's just so incredible that like younger people can grow up knowing that there are black superheroes, and to them it's not going to be a big deal. Almost in the same way that Obama was the black president, and for millions of kids, people of color, people not of color, they've grown up with having a black president, and that can be their normal almost, right? And Black Panther is that same symbol for so many children and young people all around the world now. My nephew was taken to see it. He was way too young to see the film, considering the violence in it. But he's like obsessed to the point of being banned from talking about Marvel characters. And the fact that he was able to see, like, my, as we've mentioned, my first black superhero movie was Meteor Man, but he got to see Black Panther, and I'm sure his experience was as much as I enjoyed mine, I'm sure his experience was much greater and will have a much bigger impression on him going forwards. Yeah, the fact that it broke records, I think at the time it was the second highest grossing or third highest grossing Marvel film, behind Avengers and Age of Ultron.
Wasn't it top at one point? I thought it was number 1 for a short time in terms of grossing.
I do have a list here that I can
check.
And
it broke the big barrier, right? Which is like it reached $1 billion, if I'm not mistaken.
Or was it the billion? I think I can't remember.
Billion's the big one, right? It's like you want to get to $1 billion.
Yeah, it sold 1.35 billion worldwide. And yeah, no, I was right. It was second just behind Ultron and the first Avengers movie. Yeah. And the fact that it was black made as well, right? You've got not only a predominantly black cast, we've had films with predominantly black actors, or for a very long time at least, not always. But the fact that this one was able to capture a mainstream audience and sell such a huge amount, it's probably for a lot of people the only film they've seen with a predominantly black cast, because normally they may not watch a film from that kind of niche. And then for it to be a part of nerd culture as well is huge, because as we've mentioned, research for this episode even has been more difficult than we would have liked.
Go on.
And I was gonna say also that I did do a bit of reading. I think back when the movie came out, because the soundtrack was also amazing for the film, which was created and produced, I believe, by Kendrick Lamar. The entire thing. And it's one of those rare soundtracks that I actually bought so people still buy CDs, and I still buy CDs, and I actually bought it. because he was that amazing. And I think reading the article or the interview of Kendrick Lamar interview, and he was saying that he made sure that the vast majority of people involved with making the soundtrack were either straight from Africa or African Americans. And it's like he made a point that, you know, we need to make that happen. It needs to be all the artists on there are Black. Everyone's who's participated, or I think the vast majority that participated in the making, the creation of the album was Black. And I think you can hear the soundtrack anyway throughout the film. It's they use bits of whatever the, you know, direction it goes. If it's bit of the movie's music that is taken and used in the soundtrack, I don't know. It's probably created at the same time, but it's one of the best soundtracks for any superhero movies, actually for films that I've listened to. They're literally still listening to this day. And Emily actually, she's the one that was like, oh yeah, no, she listens to it as well. Actually talking about Black Panther is Louis's favorite Marvel character. So he's like your nephew, like going on every single day. Like there's no an hour goes by when he's pretending to be Black Panther, or you know, talks about it and is asking me to play it on whatever games we got. But yeah, I think most importantly, going back to the movie itself, it was interesting to witness it, and because we do talk about a lot about representation in the media, and how, you know, how you take it for granted, like growing up, and like all the main superheroes or the main characters in the movies are that they all, you know, mainly white, and it's like, well, you know, it's like it's what you grew up with, and you're thinking, okay, that's fine. But then it's the first time that I think we talked about it on our way home from going back from playing basketball, you know, in your car, and it was like, well, actually, yeah, and you're the one that told me, oh, yeah, there's not really like a good or a great lead actor or lead character in any superhero movies. It's like in Black Panther, is that's what it's doing right now. It's making I'm not going to say proud, but it's like I've never seen, like, of all the Black people I know, suddenly it's like everybody was like one topic on. It's like, yeah, I've seen Black Panther like 3 times in a week, so I'm going again. And it's like, yeah, shit. And that's when I realized, like, yeah, actually, you know, all these things matter, and like because I was never really aware of what underrepresentation in that, for example, and especially in that type of films. It's something that was huge for the Black community, and I think that's a really cool thing to see, and to see it financially do extremely well. I think that was also important, not just critically, but like financially, and that you know, you can't use the argument against of, well, you know, if there's a Black lead, it's not going to sell, it's not going to work for us, we can't. And you know, which goes back to what we were saying about Spawn, you know, now it should be easier to greenlight this type of projects. And it's a cool thing, and that's why it's an important film. Yeah, okay, you can say it's an obvious one to pick, but I think it's such a big one, such a big moment in history, in movie history, and in social, you know, social justice and stuff like that, but in history with H, capital H, you know, it's a big moment for Black people, and I think that's really cool that we got to see it, and it's a normal thing for the vast majority of people as well to see it and go like, yeah, it's another cool movie. But hey, I think it's good that we give it a nod or so, you know, because we're important. Sorry, JC, you were saying something before I rudely.
No. Actually, fair enough. No, I'm just going to tag on to something you said right now, which is actually connected to what David said as well. The movie meant a lot to in terms of seeing representation up on the big screen, right? But also to your point, David, earlier, like you saw Meteor Man, you couldn't get a Meteor Man costume to dress up in. You couldn't get the action figure, and this movie got the whole royal suite, right? It's like that next Halloween, it has to have been the top selling costume, kids dressing up as Black Panther. And for a long time growing up, as anybody who's not white, you end up picking up costumes of white people. You dress up as someone white. And in this case, it's like you had white kids dressing up as Black Panther. And to me, it's like, all right, call it what you will, but there's some degree of progress there at the very least, right? That it's like we made it available for everyone, and we didn't make it weird, and we didn't make it like it was like pushed on in any way where it felt like it wasn't natural. It was a well-told story, and it landed. So everybody loved it. And that's the part that for me is the most important thing about Black Panther, is that it's super well written. That because it doesn't fall into the traditional Black tropes of just like, yep, if you're in a horror movie, you're gonna get killed. Yep, it's a story of like a single mom trying to raise her kids. Yep, it's someone that's down and out and is trying to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. It's none of that. People were already empowered. People already knew more than their counterparts outside of Wakanda, and that to me is like the beauty of the story. That it tells a story from a position of power, identity, and agency. You're not being manipulated by someone else. And I really, because I was kind of worried when they had Martin Freeman in there, when like Watson shows up, right? That I was like, oh, white savior moment, and it wasn't. He was just a supporting cast. Right? If he wasn't a white savior, I'm like, cool. Like they avoided all the tropes, and to me, that's what I really love about the movie.
With the worst American accent in history.
Oh God, yes.
Which is beside the point. But what I like, I thought was pretty cool, because I think the white savior syndrome they talk about was sort of flipped on its head when I think it's the post-end credit scenes when they go in front of the United Nations, and it's like they decide to, we're gonna help you guys. We got technology. No longer will we be in the shadows and being a secretive state. I thought that was pretty cool, because it's like they took that notion of looking down on poor African countries and we need to help them. And it's like, well, nah, actually we got the money, we got the technology. Let us help you guys out. I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah.
Which also there's a lot of little notes like that throughout. I think Infinity War Endgames, where we see Wakanda being referred to, and they've done a really good job with the film. I think it's not my favorite film in Marvel Universe, I'm not gonna lie, but it's up there. It's in my top 5. It's a lot of there's a lot of stuff going around that film. I like it.
And then I just wanted to just coming off the character, there's the character obviously pops up in other media. Ta-Nehisi Coates did a run of the Black Panther comic book, which I've read, which is really, really good, really, really interesting. And he looks sort of at that balance of what it is to be a king, but also be a superhero and a person, and just trying to strike the right balance between those things. And so I would recommend that. And then also the final season of the Avengers Assemble cartoon, which is available on Disney Plus. This is not an ad. It's entirely a Black Panther story called Black Panther's Quest. And from beginning to end, Black Panther is the main character. And he's supported by the Avengers at various points, but he's very much the main character, and they integrate a bunch of important characters from Wakandan lore, present and past as well. And I thought it was really cool that they obviously, I'm not sure exactly what the timing is, but I think it came after the movie, but they obviously saw that Black Panther was such a popular character, as you guys have said, that he was able to carry a whole season of their show. I think I just wrapped it up last week. But it's really, really interesting. Probably the best season of the show. And yeah, it's told all from his perspective, from T'Challa's perspective. So I would recommend anyone to check that out as well, since it's so readily available.
Always.
Yeah, I just picked up that run actually a couple of days ago, so I'm gonna start reading it. But also while I was there, I noticed that there's now I don't know if you guys are familiar with a writer called Nnedi Okorafor. She tends to write in like sci-fi. She's a Nigerian writer from Lagos.
He had to go there.
I literally looked her up just to drop that one on you. If anybody doesn't know what we're talking about, go back and check out the previous episode. But the cool thing is she's writing a Shuri run.
Nice.
And that she's doing a graphic novel for Shuri. And so I'm super curious if this is kind of like laying down the framework we talked about earlier that you're right. There's not a lot of Black female leads that like helm big projects. And Chadwick's died, rest in peace, right?
Rest in peace.
But the question is, they've already said they're not going to recast T'Challa. That's a for sure, which I thought was a really classy move by Marvel. And also, they've now said that Ryan Coogler has a 5-year deal with Disney, and one of the shows he's creating is a Wakanda show. So another one, like, all right, this is cool, but they haven't said Shuri's the new Black Panther. That's the part that I'm really keen to check out. So I'm going to start checking out this run that Akurafor's doing to see if there's any insights there of like Shuri, because in the comics she does become Black Panther at some point in the past. And I've heard a bunch of times, but I'm curious how they're framing it now off the back of Chadwick dying.
Yeah, and that would be great. That would be great for Letitia Wright if she gets to do that in the second movie. However they handle it.
And it would make sense, because if you notice the Black women character, well, the women character in Black Panther, they're all very strong, independent. Like they're all very like super, like they're ready to go. Like any one of them could literally just pick up the mantle and just go bang. I'm the new, well, I'll be the queen, right? That's one of the great things about the way that they've set up Wakanda in general, right? His army is women. Yeah.
It's an all-women army, all-female army. And then Shuri is the greatest mind in Wakanda. She creates a lot of the technology. She is the best, arguably the best engineer in Marvel comics, right?
Which take me back to that scene in Infinity War when they trying to detach the stone from Vision's head, and you've got Bruce Banner trying to explain what they did, and she's like, "Oh, I'm sure you tried your best." I was like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah, this is the Bruce Banner. And throughout that cartoon run as well, like she has her brushes with Tony Stark, and I guess the only other people that would be in that argument are the Fantastic Four, right? Reed Richards and maybe Doom himself. But she's definitely up there in terms of intelligence, in terms of her engineering skills. And it's great to say, all of these people are Black, but outside of Black Panther himself, these are all Black women.
Yeah. Which is it's amazing. It's a cool thing. I think it's really cool. Yeah. I think she should be the next one. She's got to be. She's awesome. Got enough charisma to be that. That character.
Favorite moment to look forward to MCU: Shuri walking onto screen, meeting Riri, and them both like staring each other down to see who's smartest. That would be awesome, dude. So good.
Make it happen, Marvel.
Honestly, Marvel.
Yeah.
It's all there, people. All right.
I guess my turn, right?
Yes. Introduce yourself, Tom.
Introducing myself. Hi again. Right. So I kind of wanted to take it back to real life characters, if you will, because right now we talked about comic books and movies, and I want to take it back to that Netflix documentary, which I'm sure you've watched, JC, on repeat. High Score. Your face.
It's really good. Yeah.
So it's, if you don't know what High Score is, it's I think it's a 6-parts series on Netflix, maybe 10. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. It's super short. I think it's 6. But anyway, it's retracing key moments in the video game industry and history. It's really well done. It's really well put together. And I think in episode 1 or 2, I believe it's episode 2, there's reference to this guy who I've, to be 100% honest, never heard about. And the guy is called Jerry Lawson, who was an engineer back in the 70s. So this guy is quite important. And you're asking, and I can see on your face, JC, who's Jerry? Who are you, Jerry?
Who is Jerry, Tom?
I'm glad you asked. Okay. So who's Jerry? Jerry's a self-taught engineer. And what he's done, he's created what many people consider to be the first video game cartridge. If you remember back in the days, you had a computer, a PC, or a video game unit in your house if you were rich, and games were pretty much built into the console, which means that you had to either get yourself an engineer degree and open up those bad boys and swap cartridges or swap motherboards to get a new game in there, which was highly dodgy to do. So what it's done is make sure that people wouldn't die trying to switch games. But let's go back a little bit into the story of Jerry Lawson. So he was obviously, like his story wants, he was a black engineer who worked in the 70s for a company, now gone company named Fairchild, back in San Francisco. So yeah, it's far away, deep in your hands, JC. It's more around you. And around in the mid 70s, he was made chief hardware engineer in the video game division of Fairchild. And he participated in the development of a console called the Channel F, which was a resounding
F.
It didn't sell. F. it didn't sell as that much or hardly. But again, it's back in the 70s, so the video game consoles and personal video games were not really a thing. Just back in the days, you would go down in the arcades and find the good stuff there. So they've noticed that, obviously it's what I was explaining before, that you can really swap games, or you can really easily add games to your collections, which would in turn impede in sales of consoles, personal computers that would play video games back in the days. And they were like, okay, how do we get our customers to enjoy a bigger library of games? And that's where Jerry Lawson came in, and he went, how about we take those games? Those games were on boards, like big ass boards. If you look at arcade machines, that's how they are. Inside the actual cabinet, it's an actual like a big motherboard that you would take in or out to swap the games. And he being again chief hardware engineer, he went on and spent a couple of years going back and forth with his team and went, okay, let's see how we can do this, and how can we make sure that guys can buy a bunch of games, and how do we do this? And they came up with the cartridge. Again, that was a revolution, because then that was later on adopted by pretty much everyone, but mainly Nintendo, which is, I think, somehow still sticking to it these days. So this guy's got a fascinating story, and I think it's told on a Netflix documentary by his kids, Karen and Anderson. He's got a daughter and a son. Sadly, Jerry died, I think, back in 2011, so he's not around to tell his story anymore. And it's actually a podcast, episode podcast from the guys at Common Line Heroes. I cannot say those words. And they actually got hold of his kids to do the talking, and I've literally listened to it. It's quite interesting. They go really, really in depth with Jerry's life and how he fitted in with pretty much being the only black dude on the team, and how it went on for him to be not elected, but pushed forward in front of the team, in front of everybody else, and being the leader on that project. So again, really interesting story. Go and check it out. Jerry Lawson, important name in the game, because we wouldn't be anywhere. I think, or maybe we would have jumped straight to CDs. Who knows? But they wouldn't be a massive video game industry. He's considered to be the dad of modern video games in many respects. And then there's a fun fact about Jerry that I thought was quite interesting, is that when he was still working at Fairchild, he was member of the Homebrew Computer Club, which is quite famous in the extra nerdy circles, and he was the only black guy with another chap named Ron Johns. So they were the two black guys there. And the other members, interestingly enough, was Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. I can't even say his name. Wow. And then that's what. No, I'm not saying they were four of them, but they're among the many members. Steve Jobs was in there. And then Lawson also said that he interviewed Wozniak for a job at Fairchild with him, and he turned him down, saying like, no, you're not good enough, so go do something else, go create Apple with Stevie.
Wow.
Ooh, dude, power move, turning down Wozniak.
Yeah, I would love to know if he he patented the cartridge in some way? Did he manage to benefit
don't think-
financially from
No, I
his
don't think
invention?
he made. I think I don't know if that's ever mentioned in the documentary, or if it's that's something I have to look up. But it's not mentioned in the podcast for sure. I have to rewatch the episode on High Score, but I don't think it's ever mentioned, to be honest. But he's not made a ton of money because of it. I think
Because he was working for a company.
Yeah,
It's unlikely.
It's
The
very
IP
likely.
would have been kept by the company. That's the problem in all these situations. Yeah.
And I don't think it did anything anyway, because the company itself is gone. You know, Fairchild doesn't exist
Right.
anymore.
And they would definitely exist if they had patented the cartridge as a cartridge. And that's the sad part of the story, right? Because you can be the guy. I mean, the internet was invented by a black guy as well. You can.
Wait, it wasn't invented by Al Gore?
No, that's the vaccine for COVID-19, man. What are you talking about?
Yeah, you can be the guy or the head of a team that does something like this, but if you don't take care of your P's and Q's, if you don't have the right knowledge of IP, the right knowledge to take ownership of your creations, you're just a great inventor, and you could be so much more. Like, essentially, he is the godfather of video games as we know them, for home consoles at least, and handheld consoles. But he will never get his kids. You mentioned he has kids. They should be wealthy off the back of his invention. And if you don't put your name on these things, and if you don't rubber stamp them in some way, not only your name will get lost, but all of that financial gain that the community, the black community, and your family directly could have gained will sort of be lost to time.
It's also interesting in a way that I do know the history of video games, and you do see it told by, I think, the Japanese. They're really good at telling the stories in terms of where they came from and how they got into the culture of video games. But like, I was like, when I was watching the episode, I was like, how come I never heard of that guy?
But yeah, off the back of that, Tom, one of the things that there's an interesting connection between all our stories right now, where it's like there's a movie called Ma Rainey's Black Bottom that's on Netflix right now, and it's definitely not a nerd culture movie. But the interesting thing about it is, like what we just talked about, we brought up David. It's just like there's so many creators that don't get their dues for what they did, and it's in particular in the black community, right? And the thing about it is that what Ma Rainey shows is exactly that. And interestingly, it happens to Chadwick Boseman in the movie, where he's constantly going like, I'm going to get a big record deal. I'm going to get a big record deal. I've been writing all his songs. This guy, and of course this white guy, will give me a record deal. And then at the end, he goes like, look, I'm not going to give you a record deal, but I'll pay you $5 for that song, which in the 50s was a moderate amount of money. But the song then, the basically spoilers for the movie, but the movie kind of ends on a note where the white guy then puts together an entire band to play his song, cut it on vinyl, and then make money off of it, right? So the original creator will never see more than his $5, and clearly the song's going to make way more than $5. So I think it really brings that to life in a very tactical, in a very palpable way. You can see it very clearly how he gets screwed. And at the same time, it's like he wants to create so much. He's so gifted and talented, and he's just never given the opportunity, right? And the contradiction between him and then the other person in the movie, Ma Rainey, I highly recommend watching the movie. But yes, I think it perfectly ties into that theme and still has Chadwick in it, right? That was his last starring role. So definitely go check him out.
Thanks everyone for listening to part 1 of a special episode on Black History Month. We'll be back very soon with part 2 and some more recommendations from JC, Dave, and myself. In the meantime, we would just love it if you could just join us on social media and subscribe to all of our channels. We are on YouTube, we are on Spotify, we are on Apple Podcasts, and we are on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere you can find us, we'll be there. Again, thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.